our nation, no matter what your opinions are, it's you can't argue that our nation is clearly divided more than ever, more than since the Civil War, probably. And people are spewing hateful rhetoric, and it's just getting worse and worse. And no matter what your opinion is of the current situation, change is hitting hard. Change is happening, and the chaos that comes with it is happening. It is a very weird time. But something in that word chaos, there is in chaos theory, there is no such thing as it means chaos is not chaotic. There's an order to chaos. And I'll talk to you about that more shortly. But uh, along this theme of change, you may have heard that, for instance, the magnetic north is shifting. Map data in navigations is needing to be adjusted. Doing a Google search for magnetic North Pole shift, it says referring to it's referring to the ongoing movement of Earth's magnetic North Pole, basically where a compass needle points, and it's gradually drifting more towards Siberia. That does not sound like a party, but this rate of movement of true north is accelerating over recent decades. But it's a natural phenomenon, they say, but it can affect animal migration. It can impact navigation systems, all kinds of things. And if that isn't strange enough, there's another phenomenon, which you may have heard of, that says that Earth's inner core, its molten core, okay, because it's not all solid, it rotates on its own, but it's now going backwards. And this is the first time it has done this backwards thing in about 70 years. And we probably didn't have the tools to understand it or even really know it maybe 70 years ago, but here we are watching this phenomena. And I think it's emblematic of what's going on in the world. How can it not be if we're all one, if everything is one? We've got, you've got our compasses shifting off of their true north. We've got the center of the world going backwards. So it seems like, yeah, some of society is going backwards, and depending on who you talk to. But at the same time, I know that some of you were following the planetary alignment. The planets are in alignment. And I think that means that, these things are cyclical. All these things I talked about are cyclical. They're not just random chaotic events. So somehow there is a destiny in this. And so my theme today is, could it be, because there's a destiny in this, that you were born for such a time as this? Excuse me. The phrase, such a time as this, it comes from the Bible, Esther 4, verse 14. And on Wikipedia, it defines this verse like this. For such a time as this means that someone is in a specific situation or moment where their unique abilities and position are needed to address a critical challenge or opportunity. But you can look at this metaphysically and say, what if I apply that to myself and read it like this? It means that you, in this specific time, are being called for your unique abilities and position to address a critical challenge or opportunity. Maybe it's just to talk to someone, to convince them how you feel. Maybe it's to listen to someone. Maybe it's to change the world one heart at a time, beginning with yourself. Maybe it's to bring peace to the world, whatever it is. But this whole thing follows the theme of being here on purpose, not by accident. You are here not as a part of chaos. You are here as a part, and there is no chaos. You are here as a part of this divine harmony, this divine order. And Unity talks about that in general a lot. And so, born for such a time as this. If you go into Esther chapter 4, verse 14 a little bit, this is where Mordecai, Esther's uncle, mentor, says that she may become the queen for such a time as this to save her people from persecution. Esther is a Jewish woman in Persia who becomes the queen of Persia, and she effectively thwarts a genocide of her people. And so the book of Esther asks us to trust the process even when we can't see the process working. And looking up on Wikipedia, it says it requires a posture of hope. So my interpretation is that God is at work, even though God appears not to be working. So I'm going to, and if you have a chance to read this book of Esther, it's full of lots of twists and turns, and but God's work and God's hand is behind every scene. So now I fast forward a few centuries here to April 3rd, 1968. This is the day of Martin Luther King's last speech. Someone who carried this message that we were born for such a time as this. And a friend sent me a reading from, some of you may follow Heather Cox Richardson, the author, and she has some things to say about MLK, saying that Martin Luther King told the audience in this last speech that if God had let him choose any time in which to live, he would have chosen this time all over again. And he said, now that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. Confusion is all around. But I know, he says, somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And that turned out to be a very famous quote. And he goes on to say that he felt blessed to live in an era when people finally had woken up and were working together for freedom and economic justice. Well, that work is still continuing, obviously, and needed more than ever. That work is ignited now. It's catalyzed. That work happens right now. Martin Luther King completed that speech by saying, I want you to know tonight that we as a people will make it to the promised land. So I back up and say, what is ours to do in this time? You know, regardless of magnetic north shifting and the Earth's core going backwards, our spiritual North Star has not changed, even though everything around us has changed, right? There's this theme in Unity that's taught in Unity about relative reality, the reality of condition, like sickness, the reality of condition, like strife. And then there's the absolute reality of unity, of love, of joy, of harmony, that these are called God ideas. Okay, these are principles. And so our vision has not changed. When you talk about the church's vision, you read, we are an inclusive spiritual community. We're about unconditional love. We're about compassion. We're about equality. Our vision has not changed. Our values have not changed, but they are being tested. And they're being tested, and it feels that way. And you have to remember, as someone else said, and I don't know who said this, but the most important spiritual growth doesn't happen on a yoga mat. Yes, some spiritual growth happens on a yoga mat, but the most important spiritual growth, you can think of it as happens in the challenging moments. So what is ours to do? First of all, as I alluded to earlier, lean into values, right? I'm not leaning into politics here. I'm leaning into values, whether they're Unity's values of diversity, inclusion, equality, unconditional love, divinity in everyone, seeing the divinity in everyone, no matter what they believe, and that no one is more divine than the next person because we're all emanations of the one, right? And then what are your values on top of that? What are your values on top of that? What do you stand for? So to lean into those values right now is one thing that is ours to do. Another thing that is ours to do is that we can lean into hope because there's always a reason to hope. And I wanted to just share this picture because I think many people see it. Let's see if I can do this. Many people see this symbol and don't know, some people don't know what it is. So if you don't, or even if you do, it's a helpful review of, so this is the symbol of Taoism. It's the yin and the yang, or the yin and the yang. Um, it's the unity of opposites. But one way you can look at it is in the peak of darkness. So darkness is growing and growing and growing. And in the peak of darkness is planted the seed of light. And because that seed of light is planted, then the light begins to grow. So how I look at that symbol for the first time now is that there is a reason to hope. Because when it seems hopeless, when it seems that injustice is reaching a peak, when it seems that darkness is reaching a peak, the seeds of justice, the seeds of light are being planted right now. So lean into hope. Next, we can lean into our own empowerment. A friend of mine said, I'm freaked out, but I'm looking at ways I have to be in my power and to affect positive change, but I'm fluctuating between anxiety and choosing empowerment. Does that ring true for you? It rings true for me, fluctuating between anxiety and empowerment. This is part of the dance, but uh, if you look up empowerment in Wikipedia, it says empowerment is a concept characterized by moving away from deficit-oriented perception and moving more towards strength-oriented perception. So remember our theme 5 years ago was seeing through new eyes, whether you remember or not, seeing through new eyes. So Unity teaches often see through the eyes that don't see lack and limitation. See through the eyes of the opposite, see through the eyes of power, see through the eyes of abundance. So this empowerment is getting away from that, what they call deficit-oriented perception, which just means lack and limitation thinking. I'm perceiving that way. And that's how we can keep our power. And there not being chaos, everything being in order. Last night around midnight, I was trying to finish this talk, and boom, this reading pops up from Louise Hay. And it says, the moment you say affirmations, you are stepping out of victim mode. You are no longer helpless, and you are acknowledging your power. You're acknowledging your power. So you're stepping into this land of empowerment. So if you want to say to yourself silently or out loud, after me, I will not give in to victimhood. And no one can hear you if you say that in the room that you're sitting in. Next, I'm not seeing through the eyes of a victim. And next is, I am choosing heaven today. I'm choosing power today. I will not give in to fear. Fear has no power over me. So think of affirmations. And this is a great way to, when you say it out loud, you are doing so much physically to bring out and motivate your body and your soul. In my opinion, that's why affirmations are so they're such an ancient practice, and they're right there at the heart of unity prayer is affirmations, just affirming truth statements. So whenever you're in doubt, take a truth statement about values, about hope, about your own power. Take a truth statement and write it down and create it. Let that be your mantra. That's how Charles Fillmore did it. So I'm quoting a lot of people today, and one of the final areas that I'm going to talk about. So we're talking about leaning into values, leaning into hope, right? Leaning into empowerment. But how about leaning into courage? Now, what do you think about when you think of the word courage? I think of like efforting, getting over my fear, but I'm in this land of fear and I'm efforting and I'm trying real hard. And when you watch a movie about someone who has courage, they're having a hard time, they're struggling. I mean, uh, I'm thinking about a different kind of a courage that comes from doing something that you didn't think you could do, but all of the strength was mustered inside of you to do it. Was there a time in your life that that happened? For instance, you've all heard the story about people who they see somebody in a car overturned. They see their son, the car is on fire. Someone that weighs 130 pounds goes and moves the car. They didn't effort that. All the power was within them. All of the power was summoned within them. When my mom had a stroke in 2016, all the power was summoned within me to be her full-time caregiver with no other caregiver help for 9 solid months. It was like a different me emerged, a much more powerful, well, maybe the power was in there all along. I didn't know it. But another friend of mine says, you will know what to do when the time comes. So when the time comes, leaning into courage, a courage that is effortless, right? You will know what to do when the time comes. And it may be someone needs help. It may be someone needs to be listened to. It may be someone needs some advice. It may be you need to change your own behavior and look at, you know, attitudes and behaviors where you're being in victim mode and you're courageously looking at yourself, thinking, I don't want to be that anymore. Forget what my ego says. I want to let go of being right and I want to embrace this dynamic, changing, growing being that I am. Okay. So I'm reaching the end here by saying that in times like these, we need to lean into our power, our hope, our values, our courage. And when we're tired of leaning in, the last thing I'll say is self-care, 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 self-care. And my friend Marilyn says for every moment of expansion, there needs to be 2 moments of contraction. In other words, for every spiritual, wonderful thing that happens, you need to do rest and sleep and for twice as long. Now, whether you believe that or not, this society does not historically come from rewarding self-care in that way. Check out, take take the long nap, sleep in, do whatever it is. Um, one of my friends said this about self-care. She said, rest is resistance. Rest is resistance. So that could have many, many interpretations, but self-care is self-love. And I'm complete.